Nintendo has been failing as a video game company, with the high price of the Switch 2 and its games and the surprising lack of exclusives at the launch of the console making fans question if Nintendo is still the same company as they used to be, if they're the same company that actually packed in free games and didn't charge $10 for them, or if they're the same company that once emphasized Mii's as an important fixture in the Nintendo community, but now they just hide them away in the settings of all places. So in today's video, I'm going to explain why Nintendo has become increasingly hated and greedy. I'll also reveal the only thing that Nintendo can do to make fans and players love them once again. Let's get started. 2025 has been a really tough year for Nintendo. The Switch 2 and Mario Kart World have seen endless criticism, and in a lot of cases, it's pretty justified. And these are all signs that Nintendo is having trouble appealing to their main audience. There's tons of social media content that's making one thing clear: Nintendo hasn't been satisfying their fans. And one major reason that people feel this way is greed. And you might think that I'm just going to talk about how Mario Kart World costs $80 and that's just way too expensive for a video game. But there's actually a much better example that you may have forgotten about. And that example is Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, the $10 game that everybody thought should have been a free pack-in with the Switch 2. The game, of course, is a tech demo, and to a lot of people it felt like a manual for the Switch 2, which might be exaggerating a bit, but it does feel like a game that should have been included with the Switch 2. And just this example alone proves that Nintendo has changed wildly as a company over the past 20 years. And I'll explain why that's the case in a moment, because there's actually a second example of something that Nintendo did that just shows straight up greed. And oddly enough, this just happened today at the time of recording. And what basically happened is Nintendo announced an unexpected Switch 2 edition for Animal Crossing New Horizons. Now, most Switch 2 editions that we've seen have had some extra content or something substantial that makes it worth purchasing. They usually cost around $10 to $20, and for better or worse, they do add some interesting content. But the Switch 2 edition for Animal Crossing New Horizons? No, Nintendo had to be extremely unexpected and greedy. Now, I've been somebody who's been pretty conflicted on Nintendo's greed. Like, $80 for Mario Kart World seems insane, but at least that's the only game. But guess how much this Switch 2 edition for Animal Crossing New Horizons costs? It's $5. And you might be thinking, this Switch 2 edition has real value, right? And one of my members, shout out to Red Hat, mentioned that the Switch 2 edition for Animal Crossing New Horizons is probably going to get a lot of hate for not showing enough value. And I replied back by saying I bet that's what's going to happen, but that was before I saw the price, because there really isn't that much content in this Switch 2 edition. On your screen right now are all of the changes that the Switch 2 edition is making to Animal Crossing New Horizons. The most important change here is the improved resolution to 4K in TV mode. And everything else that the Switch 2 edition includes just sounds like it was added to make it sound like there's more content than there actually is. Like, for example, having 12 players in a session for an online game of Animal Crossing, which sounds fine, the more people the better, right? Nope, because every player needs to own the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game, which by extension means that every player needs to own a Nintendo Switch 2. Which I don't even know one person who has a Switch 2 and owns Animal Crossing and would buy this, let alone 11 people. And basically every other new feature is pretty similar. It's not something that you're really going to use much ever. And I know it's only $5, but honestly, it doesn't even feel like the content here is worth $5 unless you're really playing this game a lot, which I don't really know anybody who plays Animal Crossing New Horizons anymore. But I do see a business strategy here, because Nintendo also announced a huge update 3.0 for Animal Crossing New Horizons, available to Switch and Switch 2 owners. But because this update will get people playing the game again, a lot of people who own a Switch 2 might be inclined to buy the $5 upgrade pack. After all, it'll unlock better visuals, right? But if Nintendo is making so much free content, why would they charge $5 for better visuals and a few other mid upgrades? Well, by blocking better visuals behind a paywall and making a free update to draw players in, it's sort of a bait and switch business strategy. Get people to play the game with a bunch of free content and then charge them money for the one thing they're missing out on. And to me, this would be all fine if Nintendo was actually making a lot of valuable games. But the issue is, they're really not. I mean, sure, there's Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is a good game, but Nintendo hasn't really released that many notable games besides Donkey Kong Bonanza. There was also Mario Kart World, which was considered a decent game at best, and those two games are really the only notable ones that Nintendo has released this year. And this is the big issue with Nintendo right now. They haven't been making that many new games. There have been a lot of Switch 2 editions or a lot of updates and things like that, but not as many new games as they normally make. And if I'm being honest, I don't think most people like seeing these Switch 2 editions. Like, I would prefer to see a new Animal Crossing game rather than Nintendo charging $5 for a minimal upgrade for the game and then having a free update that adds some content but not too much. I don't have a universal issue with DLC and free updates, but I'm one of those people who didn't really like Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I'm probably going to pick up the game and play it for a little while when this free update comes out, but I've been done playing that game for a long time. I just want a new Animal Crossing game, not a $5 cash grab that updates the graphics for a game that I don't really play too much anymore. And I really think these two things, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour being $10 instead of a free game with every Switch 2, and this Animal Crossing Switch 2 edition being $5 for no reason, are two of the best examples of how Nintendo has changed as a company. But real quick, if you're enjoying this video, would you please like, hype, and subscribe to my channel? It really helps me out as a creator. Also, if you want to help support my content directly, consider becoming a member. You can find out more information by clicking the join button below. Anyway, let's get right back to the video. Because with those two examples of Nintendo's greed that I just gave you, we can compare them to examples from 20 years ago. Because Nintendo wasn't doing anything like this when the Wii came out. The Wii actually had a pack-in game that came with the console. That game, of course, being Wii Sports. And that game alone being a pack-in and Switch 2 Welcome Tour not being a pack-in kind of feels off on its own. But the odd part is that Wii Sports felt like its own game that could have been sold separately, and it didn't feel like it needed to be paired with the Wii. But Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which is $10 and not included with the Switch 2, feels like it should be included, because it shows off features of the Switch 2 and is clearly meant to be an example of what the console does differently from the Switch 1. And if that doesn't feel weird enough, the Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 edition should feel weird, because Nintendo has literally never done anything like that, bundling a graphics upgrade and a few insignificant things into a package that you have to pay for. But compare that to 20 years ago, where they're basically handing out free games as long as you buy their console, not $5 graphics updates. Remember when I mentioned that one thing that Nintendo can do to make their fans love them again? Well, this is it. It's really quite simple. All Nintendo needs to do is show more value in the content that they're selling their consumers. And they did that perfectly in the Wii era, but at some point they drifted off and now they're charging $5 for minimal upgrades and $10 for tech demos. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video, and comment down below if you agree that Nintendo needs to show more value in their content. But anyway, thanks for watching and have a great day.